This country has spent years protecting power over truth, and that stops today. The House Oversight Committee chamber was already stale with the scent of old coffee and the tension that came from too many hours debating points no one truly believed. Most of the lawmakers had stopped pretending they were engaged. Their eyes drifted to their phones or the quiet murmur of aides shifting papers behind them. But Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did not look distracted. 30 minutes earlier, she had sent a secure email to the legal desks at CNN, MSNBC, and The Ledger. Attached were partial scans of the documents she was about to reveal, stamped with an Arizona court seal and a notice of confidentiality. She included a short statement typed without preamble. "I am prepared to face any legal consequences for bringing this forward." In that single sentence, there was the seed of something none of them could ignore. So when she pushed her chair back and stood, the entire room seemed to contract. She removed her glasses carefully, as though each motion had to be deliberate enough to carry the weight of what would follow. She did not ask the committee to be quiet. She asked them to pause the noise of tradition. Her voice did not rise. It sank, carrying a gravity that drew the air out of the chamber. "I will not be reading the prepared statement you have all seen." A rustle of irritation swept the row of Republican representatives seated along the dais. One of them, a senior member with a perpetual smirk, leaned back and folded his arms. But he did not interrupt. Ocasio-Cortez laid her folder on the table and flipped it open with a single, unhurried gesture. Her thumb pressed against the first page as if to ground herself in the paper's weight. For too long, this country has confused compliance with integrity. She paused, scanning the faces in front of her. That ends today. Behind her, an aide adjusted the projector cable. A dull click, and then the screen on the far wall blinked awake. A line of text appeared, magnified large enough that no one could pretend not to read it. "Paternity agreement, DNA confirmation pending." The words did not require elaboration. A flicker of movement in the press gallery revealed a producer for CNN gesturing to someone on the phone. A silent nod. Less than a minute later, the red light above the chamber doors signaled a live feed had begun. Ocasio-Cortez continued without glancing at the cameras. This document was filed in Maricopa County Superior Court in August 2019. It references a financial settlement of $3.1 million, dispersed under a designation commonly used for emergency legal expenses in federal campaigns. She drew a steady breath, her hands resting flat on the table so that no one could mistake her composure for hesitation. You can dismiss this as rumor. You can frame it as a personal matter. But when campaign funds become tools for personal concealment, it crosses into public accountability. A murmur rose, low and uncertain, from the staffers lined along the back wall. Some of them were already typing on their devices, their faces pale. One congressman tried to interrupt, his voice strained. "This is an outrageous misuse of committee time." Ocasio-Cortez did not look at him. "I am aware of the risk in presenting this. I am aware of the legal arguments that will follow. But I will not be the last person to ask why these documents were kept from the American people." CNN's Chiron updated in real time. A rolling banner declaring breaking, new documents allege misuse of campaign funds for paternity settlement. Somewhere in the control room, a director must have been whispering orders, because the camera zoomed closer, framing her face in a perfect composition of defiance and restraint. She did not flinch. Her eyes flickered once toward the lenses staring back. For a single heartbeat, she seemed to consider the enormity of what she had set in motion. "If I am wrong," her voice dropped to a near whisper, almost too soft for the microphones. "If I am wrong, then I will answer for it." She straightened her spine, her expression smoothing into a clarity that made every other noise in the chamber fall away. "But if I am right, we have allowed the truth to be bought and buried for too long." No one spoke. No one needed to. CNN did not cut away. Neither did MSNBC. Their anchors were off camera now, voices hushed, eyes flicking between their earpieces and the monitors. Somewhere in Atlanta, a senior producer whispered that they had confirmed at least part of the document chain Ocasio-Cortez had referenced. In Washington, the Oversight Committee chamber felt like it had slipped out of time. No one shuffled papers. No one cleared their throat. Every pair of eyes was locked on her. Ocasio-Cortez held the microphone in both hands. Her knuckles were pale, but her tone was steady. If a president uses campaign resources to hide the existence of a child, she said, each word sharp enough to cut, that is not merely an ethical lapse. It is a criminal act. Her gaze swept the dais. 3 committee members looked down as if the carpet might shield them. The chairman opened his mouth, then closed it again. He was already picturing the headlines he could not outrun. Behind her, an aide passed a folded note. She did not read it. Instead, she flipped the next page in the folder. The screen on the wall refreshed, displaying a set of wire transfer records dated August 2019. A payment of $3.1 million routed through an account labeled Legal Emergency Fund. It was real. The confirmation landed like a seismic wave. In the Roosevelt Room, Donald Trump stood absolutely still. The televisions were muted, but the closed captions crawled along the bottom edge, repeating her words in plain black type. He watched them as if by sheer force of will he could make them disappear. Hope Sinclair stood a few feet away, her phone against her cheek. Her eyes never left his, sir. Her voice was almost soft. They have the records, his lips parted, a slow breath, not surprised, not really. Only the tiniest flicker of something that looked almost like regret. If this is true, he thought, then I have not only buried the truth, I have destroyed it. But the thought did not last. He slammed his hand flat on the table. Get me every network. Now. Hope did not flinch. Sir, you have to consider that if you go public with a legal threat, the Arizona court will be forced to confirm the existence of the affidavit. He turned toward her, eyes bright with something hard and brittle. Good. Her brow creased. Good. If I am going to be accused, he said, his voice low and dangerous, then we will drag them into the light with me. She did not respond. Outside the door, an aide was already dialing the numbers that would summon the full machinery of political counterattack. Back in the chamber, Ocasio-Cortez set her papers down. She exhaled, a single measured breath. I understand the gravity of these allegations. I understand the consequences if they are unfounded. But I also understand what it means when leaders believe they are entitled to secrecy at any cost. The words echoed. No one moved to interrupt. On the CNN live feed, a small ticker updated in real time. Verified records linked to known shell companies. Verified transfer. Verified date. In the White House press office, a communications director watched the feed with her hand pressed to her mouth. This was not rumor anymore. This was documentation. A fact. Trump stared at the screen until the letters blurred. He thought of the hotel room in Phoenix. The envelope he never opened. The name he never said. A choice he made that had finally found its way back. His jaw tightened. Call every outlet. Announce the suit. Hope's reply was almost a whisper. Understood. An alert flashed on newsroom terminals across the country. Trump to file defamation action against Ocasio-Cortez. A senior reporter at the Ledger typed into Twitter without looking away from the television. If Trump sues, the Arizona court will have no choice but to unseal the paternity file. The tweet ended with a phrase that would be repeated all night. Two-edged sword. In bars, kitchens, and offices, Americans looked up at the screens. They did not need a pundit to explain it. They felt it. Whether she was right or wrong, the truth was no longer contained. It was alive, and it was coming for all of them. Genevieve Larkinson was only 2 blocks from her driveway when her phone buzzed against the console. She ignored it at first, too tired to care. The night shift had been brutal, 12 hours of fluorescent lights, and the dull ache of knowing something was coming. Then the screen flashed again. Unknown number. 1 line of text. Your name is circulating. They will come looking. She felt her pulse kick in her throat. The car idled in the middle of the street as she reached for the emergency brake with a hand that did not feel like hers. Her breathing went thin, shallow. She thought she had more time. 1 more day to decide whether she would ever speak. 1 more day to pretend none of this was real. But it was real, and it had been real since Phoenix. 2005. A hotel room that smelled of expensive cologne and something colder underneath. He had leaned back in the chair, watching her with the casual disdain of a man who never heard the word no. Do not be stupid, he said, his voice as smooth as it was merciless. Do not ever check the DNA. She had signed the papers because she believed it would end there. It never did. Now the story was everywhere, every channel, every phone. Every feed. She set the parking brake and folded over the steering wheel, pressing her forehead to the leather. A single thought pulsed behind her closed eyes. If they find me, I will have to choose. In the West Wing, Melania Trump sat alone in a secured conference room. A tablet glowed in front of her, showing the feed from the Oversight Committee. She did not look angry. She did not look surprised. When the aide connected the call, Donald's face appeared on the monitor. His hair was disheveled. His tie hung loose at his collar. He looked at her, and for a moment neither of them spoke. She was the one to break the silence. Is it true? He did not answer. She tried again. Did you forbid me to get the DNA test? His gaze shifted to the table. Still nothing. She let out a breath so quiet the microphone barely caught it. When she spoke, her voice was almost tender. No, Donald, he looked up. It is not your son. It is mine. She ended the call before he could reply. The screen went black. He sat back in the chair, staring at his own reflection in the glossy surface of the table. For a fraction of a second, he looked like a man who did not know which lie had finally broken everything. Across town, the newsroom at the Ledger was a blur of motion, editors barking updates, production assistants tripping over power cables. Conrad Wells sat alone at a corner desk, the only island of stillness in the chaos. He had been chasing this thread for years. Most days it felt like nothing but noise. A scrap of legal language here, a half-redacted invoice there, but tonight it all fit. His fingers flew over the keyboard. Red Lantern Diagnostics, Arizona, 2019. He pulled up the routing logs. There it was. A transfer flagged for special handling. From an entity known to process paternity confirmations. He could feel the adrenaline spike behind his ribs. He tried to tell himself it was just another story. But he knew better. This was the moment the lie stopped being private. This was the moment it became public property. The kind no one could ever bury again. He opened a new search window. Cross-referenced the lab's client list with the filings Ocasio-Cortez had disclosed. The same account number, the same date. He swallowed, his throat dry. This was bigger than he had imagined, bigger than the headlines, bigger than the politics. It was about whether a democracy could survive a secret this corrosive. His cursor hovered over the final query. He almost hesitated. Almost. Then he hit enter. And in that instant, somewhere deep in the federal records system, a flag triggered that would not be ignored. Hours later, a clerk in the Eastern District Court would see the alert, would read the request, would stamp it urgent. Conrad leaned back in his chair, feeling the exhaustion rush in behind the adrenaline. He did not know yet that by morning, a federal subpoena would be signed and dispatched. He did not know that no one, not even the President of the United States, would be able to stop it. The federal subpoena was signed at 7:58 in the morning. Judge Rosanna Vitarelli read it twice before she picked up her pen. She had been expecting something like this. In truth, she had been waiting years for it. The request was precise, almost surgical. Release the sealed filings. Confirm the existence of the paternity affidavit. Acknowledge the chain of custody. She pressed the tip of her pen to the signature line and let out a breath she had been holding since 2019. National security is no longer a valid pretext, she whispered. Then she signed her name. Across the country, Genevieve Larkinson was standing in her kitchen when her phone rang. The screen showed her lawyer's name. She nearly let it go to voicemail, but her hand moved before she could stop it. She pressed accept. Harris's voice came through, rough from lack of sleep. You saw the headlines. She did not answer. Genevieve, you are not invisible anymore. Her gaze drifted to the window. Sunlight glinting off the cars parked along the curb. Normal, so deceptively normal. Harris exhaled. You have a choice. You can stay silent and they will fill in every blank with whatever suits them, or you can tell the truth yourself. Her throat felt tight. My son does not know everything. Then he will find out from someone else. She closed her eyes. The silence stretched long enough that Harris almost spoke again. When she finally replied, her voice sounded smaller than she remembered. I never wanted this. I know, but you have it. Now you decide what you will do with it. He hung up before she could change her mind. The phone slipped from her fingers onto the counter. She did not pick it up. Instead, she turned to look at the breakfast table. Her son's textbooks were still stacked in the corner. A half-finished essay on constitutional law lay open, highlighted in neon yellow. She thought about the irony, about how he believed in systems, in institutions that protected the vulnerable. He did not know how thin that protection could be. She walked to the cabinet and reached for the red folder she had kept hidden behind the cereal boxes. Her hands were steady now. When she set it down on the table, she rested her palm against the cover, feeling the weight of every page inside. If I stay silent, she thought, no one will ever know how much was stolen. How many lives were rearranged to protect a single man's image? Her son walked in, backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked at her with the soft impatience of someone too young to see the fractures behind a mother's composure. She tried to smile. It did not reach her eyes. He kissed her cheek and disappeared out the door. She waited until she heard the latch click shut before she pulled the folder closer. She opened it and began to read, line by line. Clause by clause, every signature, every date, every falsehood she had agreed to for the sake of peace. By the time she finished, her hands were trembling, but her resolve was not. If I do nothing, she thought, then I am no different from him. She closed the folder and set it in the center of the table. Then she went to the sink and washed her face. Across the Potomac, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat in a CNN green room. The lights were dimmed, the monitors tuned to muted coverage of her own testimony. A producer hovered near the door, whispering updates into a headset. She did not hear them. Her eyes were closed. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she replayed every decision that had led her here. The risk, the uncertainty, the moment she had seen the file and known there was no going back. If I am wrong, she thought, then I will be destroyed. But if I am right, then the truth will not die in silence. She opened her eyes, steadying her breath. One more heartbeat, one more step into the unknown, and she would decide what came next. The Arizona court clerk stamped the release order just after 10:15 in the morning. Within minutes, copies of the paternity affidavit and the transaction history were dispatched to every major network. CNN broke the embargo first. A banner flashed across the bottom of the screen in urgent red. Confirmed, federal funds used in private settlement. In living rooms, airports, and offices, people stopped what they were doing to watch. The document showed what many had only guessed. $3.1 million routed through a legal emergency fund tied directly to the Trump 2020 campaign account. The words were plain, unambiguous, and impossible to explain away. By midday, Not His Son was no longer just a hashtag. It was a fault line. Every outlet carried it. Fox News tried to soften it, calling it unverified. MSNBC ran split screens of the payment receipts and Ocasio-Cortez's testimony. Even the Ledger, usually cautious, published the files in full. In the West Wing, the hallway outside the Roosevelt Room was a blur of aides moving too fast to meet each other's eyes. Inside, the atmosphere was worse. Hope Sinclair stood by the windows, her phone in one hand, the lawsuit draft in the other. A conference table littered with legal pads, half-finished coffee, and the kind of silence that meant nothing good. She turned to face the president. "Sir." Her voice was too calm to be reassuring. "The filing is ready." He did not look up from the folder on the table, the one stamped confidential in thick black letters. "We file now," she continued, "and you can stand in front of every camera in the country and say you will not be smeared." His hand twitched, but he said nothing. Hope swallowed, "But you understand the trade. Filing this suit compels the Arizona court to authenticate every record." Her tone did not rise. It did not need to, because in that room everyone knew the implications. You could feel it in the air, like a storm no one could outpace. Trump lifted his head. His eyes were bloodshot but steady. "File it." Hope hesitated just long enough that he noticed. "Sir, if they see the payment vouchers." "File it," the word was final. She nodded, fingers tight around the lawsuit draft as she stepped into the hall. Reporters were already gathering near the West Wing entrance. Their voices overlapped, questions tumbling over each other in the scramble to get the first reaction. Has the president seen the court documents? Is he planning to resign? Was campaign money used to pay for the paternity agreement? Hope kept her gaze straight ahead. She did not answer. She did not trust her voice to hold. By the time she reached the communications office, the first alerts had hit news feeds nationwide. Trump files defamation suit against Ocasio-Cortez. A second headline followed less than 60 seconds later. Arizona court confirms release of full affidavit and transaction records. In a conference room at CNN's New York bureau, a senior producer looked up from her laptop. Her hand covered her mouth as the text of the order scrolled across the monitor. It was happening. Everything that had been hidden was coming out, page by page. In the Roosevelt room, Trump did not watch the coverage. He stared at the wall. Hope returned quietly and set the signed filing down on the table. Her fingers brushed the edge of the folder just enough to feel how heavy it was. "Sir." Her voice was almost gentle now. "If they see the payment trail, you will not just lose the election. You will be indicted." He did not respond. For a moment, the only sound was the quiet hum of the air vent overhead. When he finally spoke, his tone was lower than she had ever heard it. "Even if I win," he said, the words brittle as old paper, "I still lose." No one corrected him, because in that room there was nothing left to say. The chamber was already packed when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stepped onto the floor. Reporters lined the railings, their cameras trained on the small folder in her left hand. Even before she spoke, the room felt different. Not like a press conference, not like a political stunt, more like a reckoning. She paused behind the microphone. For one long moment, she did not speak. She looked down at the folder, her thumb pressed against the clasp. Her breath came slow, deliberate, as if she were counting each second to steady herself. Then she lifted her gaze. Her eyes met the camera lens without flinching. "If today this were about my child," she said, her voice low but carrying through every corner of the hall, "I would want someone to ask why the truth was hidden." She let that hang there, not an accusation, not a plea, just a fact that no one could sidestep. Behind her, an aide shifted his weight, watching her with the quiet dread of someone who understood the stakes. Ocasio-Cortez set the folder on the podium and opened it with one precise motion. Inside, the document was simple. A single court order, one page, but it held the weight of years. "This," she said, lifting it high enough for the cameras to focus, "is the original DNA testing order issued by an Arizona court in 2019. She unfolded it, the paper crackling in the microphone. It was signed. Stamped. Undisputed, it was also ignored. The test was never conducted. The court was never permitted to confirm or deny, and for almost a decade, no one in power asked why. The chamber was silent. On the screens behind her, news crawls updated in real time. Arizona court order confirmed, DNA test blocked in 2019. She did not lower the paper. "Because if I do nothing," she said, her voice tightening just enough to betray the cost, "then this becomes another footnote in a history of men who believed the truth was optional." She looked over her shoulder once at the rows of lawmakers who would rather be anywhere else. Then she faced the cameras again. "I have no interest in punishing a child for the choices of adults. But I will not protect the powerful from questions the rest of us would have to answer." Her hand trembled once as she set the document down, not from fear, from relief. In a small house 2,000 miles away, Genevieve Larkinson watched the broadcast from her kitchen table. The red folder she had carried for years sat open in front of her. Her lawyer was on speaker, saying something she barely heard. Because all she could think was how long she had tried to believe silence was safety. How many nights she had convinced herself she was doing the right thing by saying nothing. Now, the truth was bigger than her. And that was the only reason she felt brave enough to let it out. She cleared her throat. The reporter on the other end of the call stopped mid-question. "I will make a statement," she said. Her voice did not waver. Silence does not protect anyone except the people who have everything to lose if the truth is told. The reporter did not interrupt. He just waited. Because for the first time there was nothing to add, nothing to soften. It was all there. On the record, in the chamber, Ocasio-Cortez closed the folder and stepped back from the microphone. Her pulse was a roar in her ears. She did not look at the lawmakers. She did not look at the cameras. She looked past them. As if she could see the thousands of people watching from living rooms, break rooms, crowded sidewalks. She took one more breath. Then she turned and walked away. In the seconds that followed, the networks began to post the documents online. No paywall, no commentary. Just the raw evidence. pages that had been hidden in sealed drawers while the country argued over rumors. By the time the feed cut back to the anchor desk, the story had already changed. People were no longer asking whether she was telling the truth. They were asking why it had been acceptable to bury it for almost a decade. The Oval Office was almost too quiet. The kind of silence that felt alive, waiting to swallow whatever came next. Donald Trump sat behind the resolute desk, a sheaf of papers in front of him that he had no desire to read. Hope Sinclair's resignation letter was on top. Her handwriting was precise, almost apologetic. She had been with him longer than most, long enough to know that no one survived a scandal like this intact. A junior aide cleared his throat, voice unsteady. "Sir, she wanted me to give this to you personally." Trump did not lift his gaze. He traced the edge of the envelope with one finger, as if delaying the moment he would have to open it. He could hear Hope's voice in his memory, measured, calm, always trying to find the narrowest path between damage and survival. He wondered if she had known there was never really a path at all. Outside the windows, the lawn glowed under floodlights. A television mounted in the corner was muted, but the captions rolled on. Ocasio-Cortez refuses additional comment. Genevieve Larkinson confirms authenticity of documents. The words looked unreal. He turned away from the screen. His voice came out low, more to himself than to the aide still standing there. "If this is true," he murmured, "if all of this is true, how many people did I make lie to themselves to protect me?" No one answered. Because there was nothing left to say that would change any of it. On the other side of the city, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat in her small congressional office. No cameras, no advisors. Just the steady tick of the old clock on the bookshelf and the soft hum of the computer monitor. She could have called a press conference. She could have claimed a victory. Instead, she opened her email and drafted a message to every member of the House. "I did not do this to win." She paused, letting the cursor blink in the empty space. "I did this because if we allow the truth to be buried, we all lose something more important than any election. We lose the ability to look our own conscience in the eye." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The message would land in dozens of inboxes before the networks even knew it existed. Outside her door, the hallway was lined with reporters waiting for a comment she had no intention of giving. She did not owe them a spectacle. She owed them clarity. In the quiet, she pulled a yellow legal pad from her drawer and began sketching the framework of a bill. A legal safeguard for whistleblowers who risked everything to challenge the misuse of power. The first lines came easily. A statement of purpose. A pledge that no one should have to choose between the truth and their safety. She knew the bill might never pass, but some fights were worth starting even if you never saw them end. An aide knocked once, soft. "Congresswoman, the cameras are still here." She did not look up. "Thank you. I will be leaving shortly." When she finally rose, the legal pad was half full. Her hand ached, but she felt lighter than she had in months. In the elevator, she closed her eyes and let the hum of the machinery settle her thoughts. When the doors opened onto the ground floor, the flashbulbs went off in a storm of white. Reporters pressed forward, shouting questions she did not answer. She walked past them until she reached the brass rail that separated the foyer from the street. There she stopped. She looked directly into the nearest camera. Her voice did not tremble. "Image is what we build to shield ourselves. Truth is what we have to live with when the lights go out." She let the words settle. "Today," she said, "I chose the truth." Then she turned and walked into the night.